Recently, I'm reading The Black Hill by the famous Mamang. She's from Arunachal, Pradesh, a regional writer. Of course, she writes in English, and she was awarded the Padam Sri. She's a journalist, an IS, and also the Sahitya Akademi Award winner. And this is, let me just show you, or turn the pages to show you that this is The Black Hill by Mamang. Then what you have is, it's by Rupa Publishers. It is Aleph Book Company. And of course, all the copyright information 2014 and all of that, the ISBN. The story is all about struggle and all of that. It is about the French priest, Father Nicholas Crick. He's central to the story, and there's another parallel story, a love story. I mean, the plot is interesting. It's okay for you to find out. But quickly, let me walk you through the writing style. That's what anyways attracts me to reading. Story are more or less the same. They're not an important aspect to me as I read. So key features of her style in the novel, let me quickly go through. It's like there is a mythical tone to it. There's a poetic prose of hers. She writes like a storyteller by fireside, not a historian. Sentences are often long, rhythmic, and image heavy. And even if you go through the political moments or the violent moments, they get a quiet, almost dreamlike treatment. Like, for example, the river was a god that day, or the hills held their breath. She treats landscape as a character. And then you'll find that there's no single hero here. The novel shifts between Father Crick's perspective, Kajin Shah and Gimor's story, and the collective voice of the villagers. Nobody gets to own the truth. That reflects her project, filling the silences, history. Now she fills up that with imagined interior lives. And also that you find that history blends with folklore. She takes a documented event, but she refuses to write like a thriller. Instead, she weaves it into the oral traditions of the place, omens, dreams, and songs. The real dates also sit beside, like lines like the priest came walking with the wind. So here you see it blurs fact with the nature and myth, etc., on purpose. And she doesn't sensationalize anything. The emotional weight comes from what's not said. And then for you, now I'm not going to say anything, give any spoilers, you must find out for yourself. And then there is a deep sense of place. The forests, rivers, and mountains of Arunachal aren't backdrop, they are active forces. The weather changes that you find, they signal plot shifts. She uses local names, flora, and rituals without over-explaining, trusting the reader to enter that world. So So as you read, you feel that she isn't writing a conventional historical novel. She's a poet and journalist from the Adi tribe, writing in English about a place usually spoken about, not from. She's place usually spoken about, and she's not talking from there. So the style is hybrid, poet. If you see from the poetic angle, attention to rhythm, image, silence. And if you see from her journalistic angle, commitment to documented facts. And if you see it from the angle of insider, there is intimacy with the land and oral culture. So critics call it fictional narrative, filling the gap of historical records. You feel like you're hearing a story that was always there, just never written down. And what you really find interesting is, or rather it's easy to read for me, people like me, that there is, which I find hers the strongest, is the poetry in the landscape. She doesn't just describe Arunachal, she makes the region breathe. Watch the characters. Perhaps that's why the book won the Sahitya Akademi. Like for example, let's just take the landscape as a living presence. She rarely says the forest was dense. Instead, the hills, rivers and wind act, feel and judge. Let's talk about examples from there, the feel of the imagery that she presents. The hills held their breath when strangers passed. Wow, so beautiful, right? Let's just talk about the river. The river was a god that day, swollen and unforgiving. Let's see what she writes about the mist. Mist came down like a curtain, and the world beyond the village ceased to exist. So the region isn't scenery, it's a character that can grant passage or deny it. And even others, like for example, she talks about the moon, so in so many places. She talks about the wind. It's like really poetry if you just go through it. And her love for the nature or the Himalayas, like it shows how much she knows the place. She knows the eastern Himalayas. So you get textures most historical novels miss out. For example, the sound. The chickadees started their evening prayer, or bamboo clattered in the wind like the bones of the earth. And if you're talking about the smell touch, she describes smoke from the hearths, the wet earth smells before rain, or paths slick with moss that shone like snake skin. Then if you're talking about the light, the sun fell in shafts between the trees, and for a moment the forest was cathedral. That line captures how she links nature to the spiritual, important when a priest is wandering through it. And she sort of weaves the myth into geography. She layers folklore into real places. A mountain isn't just tall, it holds stories. Let's take an example from the book, like when Gimur and Kanjin Shah flee to the Mishmi Hills. Dai writes that every ridge had a name and every name had a warning. The land is mapped by memory and taboo, not just maps. The Black Hill itself becomes symbolic, a place of beauty, danger, and transition that colonial maps can't capture, or any maps can't capture for that matter. Then, of course, the story is way back during the colonial regime. And then her poetry background shows in cadence. She uses repetition and parallel structure to slow you down. They walked, the river walked with them, the silence walked with them. Short, measured. It makes the trek physical for the reader. You feel the weight of distance. Even weather is an emotion. Like for example, she matches the emotional tone to the environment instead of spelling feelings out. Let's talk about tension. How does she portray tension? Clouds. Clouds massed over the peaks like an army gathering. You know trouble's coming for Crick without her saying it. Grief. After the killing, the valley was very still. Even the birds had forgotten their songs. Then, for example, intimacy. Gimur and Kanjisha's moments are often sheltered. The rain made a small room around them. Now, for example, the colonial records, as when she was doing her research, calls it unmapped territory. Mamang De calls it shows it's intensely mapped. How? By stories, seasons, spirits. The region isn't empty, it's full. Then she also explains the conflict. Why would tribes risk death to block two priests? Because the land was not land to them. It was ancestor, mother, law. Her descriptions make that belief tangible. And the girl, she gives her is fictional, of course, created to articulate the silences of history. Dai often does that through how Gimur sees the hills. Her love for Kanjinsha and the land are the same thing. So she sort of finds, while she's writing in that story with a historical background, etc., she goes along with the visual. She finds the visual and spiritual delight in a place most 19th century accounts call savage. So it's for you to discover. I found it very interesting, the way she goes about storytelling. Happy reading The Black Hill by Mamang Dai.